Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. Pie, anyone? I was in a great mood, which is till I flung open my door and was hit with the memories of last evening like a prize fighter's fist to the face. The room lay cold and quiet, yet I could still see Nimicie fading out of existence in my mind and still hear her crying out to me over and over, "Hellscream! Come find me!" The fireplace laid cold and dormant now, with a huge crack from the headstone all the way up the center of the chimney to the ceiling. The afternoon sun shining on this still gorgeous table full of food, half of which I did not even notice the night before. I walked over to the table and gave it the more appreciative look that it deserved from last night. A beautiful lace cloth covered the table, and there were homemade buns and cookies, sliced pickles and tiny cheese tastes cut into hearts, 2 bowls of stuffing, and a meat pie I didn't even notice. And there on the far end of the table was an old world sugar pie, tarte au sucre, as my grandmother would call it. I picked it up and gave it a long sniff. Instantly I was 5 years old in my grandmother's kitchen again. "Thank you, Nimicie, for everything," I said to myself, and whatever gods were listening. That's when I noticed the fine bottle of wine down by her chair in what was now a bucket of water. I picked it up and smiled, then put it down on the corner of the table and proceeded to pack up all the food, all except for the sugar pie, the bottle of wine, and the beautiful lace tablecloth. The rest I packed up and headed upstairs to the cheap old man's apartment. My hands full, I kicked at his door, and when he opened it, I burst in. "A meal for you, grandfather," I said as I headed for his table and laid out the food. "Now come eat it quick as it's been in the sun the whole day." "I have no money," he said as he hobbled over to the table, grabbing and putting on a napkin on his way. "I have no need for your money, grandfather," I said. "Just be sure and eat it all, and if you can't, invite a friend to come feast." He waved at me with his free hand as with his other stuffed turkey into his face. I smiled and nodded and turned to leave. "And keep the dishes!" I yelled as I slammed his door and hurried down the stairs to my own apartment, thinking to myself, it's been 15 years I've lived here, and I've never gotten that old man's name, just always called him grandfather. I kept trying to push Nimicie out of my head and stay in a good mood with thoughts of hunting as I cleaned up my apartment. I took off His Majesty's uniform and folded it neatly on top of my dresser, and opened my old trunk to put on my buckskins and grab my bow and rod. And not knowing if I was ever coming back or not, I decided to also put on the fine armor chest piece of black trillium and inlaid gold that the ambassador of the Draenei gave me for training his guards. Guess he was in on the plot too? I thought to myself as I put it on. Finally, I pulled out the watch His Majesty gave me and proudly placed it on my wrist. I was ready. I grabbed the fine tablecloth, the bottle of wine, and the sugar pie. And off to the Pig and Whistle, I went to offer Megan a most humble apology for trashing her pub. As I walked into the pub, I placed my bow and fishing rod by the front door, and there was Megan behind the bar, wiping it down with a cloth. A beautiful middle-aged woman who aged very well, and a shroud businesswoman to boot, who in one way or another had her fingers in pies of the alcoholic trade community all over Azeroth, a woman you did not want angry with you, for you would never get a drink anywhere again. Upon seeing me, she immediately dropped the rag on the bar, crossed her arms, and turned to face the bottles at the back of the bar. She tilted her head a little to listen to see if I was coming her way. And when she heard me heading for her and placing my bundle on the bar, a long pointy finger came darting out from her left side. "Get out, Sergeant," she demanded. "Ah, Megan, my sweet, I came to apologize. And look, I brought you gifts," I so smoothly said. She glanced over her shoulder to see what I had brought, gave a humph, and returned to staring at the bottles with her arms folded in front of her. "Who is she?" she questioned angrily. "Who is who? My sweet?" I answered sweetly. Don't you play coy with me, Sergeant Zart, she said as she turned and started shaking her finger in my face. You have not been that drunk and unruly since your wife died. So, ho, I repeat, is the trollop. I didn't dare tell her about Nimicie. I'd never get another drink in Azeroth again. No, it was better to tell a white lie and spare her feelings and save my ability to get ale anywhere. No other woman, my love. The bastards retired me. I tried to look angry, and she returned the angry look for a second, but could not hold it with the news that there was no other woman. She crossed her arms, raised one eyebrow, and continued scolding me. I know. I was there, the girl in the front row, clapping and cheering and making an ass of myself, she said, while giving me a look of disdain. Yeah, thank you. I went with that, not knowing what else to say. Anyway, I'm sorry I'll pay for any damages, and here I brought you these gifts, I said as I untied the four corners of the tablecloth to reveal the pie and the wine. She got an angry look again and shook her finger at the pie. No woman, huh? Who made this beautiful pie? Her finger moved from the pie to my face. You sure didn't. No, my sweet, a gift from the old woman across the street this morning, for my retirement and the bottle of wine from grandfather upstairs. Oh, now I know you're lying. Again, waving her finger in my face. That cheap old bastard comes in here and tries to buy half glasses of ale. I ignored her comment and continued. And the tablecloth was my mother's, and now it's yours. My fairy tale must have worked because her face and mood changed in a heartbeat. Oh, it's beautiful and so delicate, thank you. I'm still mad, you know, she scorned. Perhaps this bottle of wine and some pie would put me in the mood to forgive you, she said while taking her finger out of my face, carefully placing the tablecloth beneath the bar and grabbing the wine and pie and motioning for me to come to join her upstairs at our private booth. I followed her closely up the stairs and to the far corner table where wine glasses and candles had already been placed. As she popped the cork and started pouring, she smiled at me and asked me to sit. I felt as if I had just walked into the wolf's den. I sat, and she handed me a glass of wine. Oh, she said. Is that the watch the king gave you? She took the wine out of my hand, placed it on the table, and pulled my hand closer to her as she bent to look at the watch while purposely placing the back of my hand against the exposed bare part of her breasts just above the dress line. It's absolutely beautiful, she said while bringing her eyes to meet mine. Not as beautiful as you, my sweet, I said with a smile, and pulling my hand away to grab my wine and pretend I did not notice where my hand had been, I continued. So am I forgiven, my love? I raised my glass to take a sip, and she placed her hand over the top of it. You will pay for the damages? She half asked, half instructed. Oh, yes, of course. I reached into my purse to grab some gold and plopped it on the table along with the ring I had bought for Nimicie. Her eyes got huge as she noticed the ring immediately. Oh, shit, I said out loud. Thinking quickly, I continued. I mean, that was supposed to be a surprise for after I got back from my hunting trip. My love. Quickly, she threw her hand on top of the gold and the ring, saying, Then, I'll just hold this for you until you get back. Wouldn't want it to get lost, she said as she looked at me curiously and pulled the gold and the ring to her side of the table. Knowing when to take my cue and beat a hasty retreat, I gulped down my wine, took a swipe at the pie with my finger and placed it in my mouth, smiled, and got up to head for the stairs. As I was just hitting the stairs, she said, without even looking at me, Oh, and Dawn. I turned to face her at the top of the stairs, still with my finger in my mouth, and she continued, That ring had better fit. Taking my finger from my mouth, I replied, That pie is very good. As I ran down the stairs, grabbed my bow and rod, and made a fast getaway. Chapter number 7. It's hard to wake a sleeping bear. A quick trip to the bank to pick up a purse full of gold for the trip and choose the magical mount I would use on this trip. Being that I was a sergeant in His Majesty's service, I had quite the collection. Birthdays, holidays, and any other occasion, they seemed the perfect gift for a soldier on the go. And I kept every one of them, from the swift black horse, given to me for my name day, my first year in the service by my sergeant, to that huge monstrosity, purple gorilla-looking thing Valdor gave me last fire festival. He laughed his half-ass off, seeing me mounted on the neck of that huge thing. Since it was going to be a long, slow ground trip because Chili hates to fly, I decided to go with an old favorite, my armored brown battle bear I've had for I don't know how long. One of the few I actually bought myself up north in Dalaran. It was tough, slow, comfortable, but mostly quiet, and one of the few mounts Chili didn't attack Jealous Bear. I quit my job and picked up 2 extra quivers of arrows and was on my way to Goldshire to pick up Chili from the stables. On my way out the gates of Stormwind, I spotted an old friend on guard duty right at the gate. He obviously spotted me as well in my fine armor and buckskins, with 2 extra quivers of arrows tied to my bear mount. Being on duty at the time, he could do little more than giving me a nod as I slowly rode past. I acknowledged his nod and honored him with saying out loud, "I wish you were coming too, my friend." And now that I think about it, I think that is what made me a good sergeant. I always seemed to know what people were trying to say, even when they couldn't or wouldn't get it out. Rounding the bend to Goldshire, I could see the roofs of the inn and old lady Fielder's house, and just a hint of the blacksmith shop across the road. A quick stop at Crystal Lake to see Jason Mathers, the fishmonger, to pick up his biggest salmon for Chili as a gift. After all, it had been over a year since I last saw Chili, and I figured the peace offering would be a nice touch. That, and help that lazy-ass bear get to his feet. But that's why I chose the Goldshire stables and not the ones in Stormwind, because Irma, the stable master there, originally trained as a white magic user in the City of the Sky before she found her true calling and renounced her vows to work for the king as his stable master in Goldshire. She uses her abilities and talents to keep pets and wild animals stabled there in a state of blissful hibernation so they didn't notice the passage of time or revert to their former wild ways. And this was best for my friend Chili, for I was never really sure if he was under my clumsy magic, Beastmaster spell, or if he had accepted me as his family. Either way, he has been my best friend since my early 20s, and not seeing him for a whole year seemed a bit rude. Spotting Irma standing outside the stables, I rode up. "Well met, my lovely Irma. How are you this fine day?" I dismounted my bear with my fish under my arm wrapped in paper and my bow on my back. "I see you brought a gift for that monster bear of yours, and none for me, huh?" she said, while crossing her arms. Quickly, I dropped the fish to the ground, spun around, and pulled a new arrow from one of the quivers I just purchased. "Au contraire, my sweet," I said while holding up the arrow. "My lucky arrow, it brings good fortune to whomever owns it," I smoothly said with a half bow for good measure. She took the arrow and inspected it, saying, "It looks brand new," and gave me a curious eye. "Oh, I never use it," I said, and with a quick turn and in a flash, I grabbed the arrow from Irma, flung the bow off my back, and shot it into the headboard above the stable doors. "There, it has found a home and will bless your stables." I smiled, looking at the arrow. She gave me a love tap to the back of the head while saying, "This place has enough holes in it, Sergeant. But I do like the pretty green feathers. Thank you." She then looked back from the arrow and at me, asking, "Shall I wake your bear for you, Sergeant?" I picked my fish up of the ground and smiled. "If you would be so kind," I replied. She hitched her arm over mine and pulled me close to her side as we walked and talked through the stables. "You know, Sergeant, of all the wild and dangerous animals the king has stabled here, your Chili worries me the most. Most here dream of fishing and hunting, and so does your Chili, but he also dreams of battle, very violent and bloodthirsty battles," she said as she stopped to look at me for a second before continuing. "Sometimes I can't sleep at night after viewing one of his dreams. But his dreams, Sergeant, good or bad, you're always in them. It is good to see you two have found each other," she finished as we arrived at Chili's stable. Chili was lying on his side in the fresh hay, snoring to beat the band, his ass end pushed up against the back boards and bending them. Irma raised her hands to her face, whispered something between them, and clapped. A bright yellow light shot from her hands and all around Chili. Chili stopped snoring but remained motionless. Irma clapped again. No light this time. "Humph," she stated. "He's awake, Sergeant." She nodded at me, then turned to Chili with her hands on her hips. "He's just being a lazy bear," and she stomped off. I unwrapped the fish and laid it head first on the ground in front of Chili's nose. Are you just being a lazy bear? I asked as I squatted in front of him and scratched the back of his ear. I stood and took a walk around Chili to inspect his care. His white coat was nicely clean and free of tangles. There was no shit between his toes. His ears were clean, and the hay could only be a day old at best. Well, I said, you've been pampered, as I squeezed between him and the stall and came back around to the front of him, just in time to watch him poke out his big black lips on a search and destroy mission to find the salmon, and when found, suck it whole into his mouth without moving an inch. He lay there not moving, eyes shut, munching on his snack. Get up, you lazy good-for-nothing bear. We're burning daylight, I demanded. He did not move, except to swallow his snack. Get up! Again, he did not move. I spotted a bucket of water sitting on a shelf beside the stall, picked it up, and dumped it on his head. Get your fat ass up, I demanded. A big blue tongue darted out from between his lips, lapping up the water, yet still he did not move. I knelt down beside him and scratched my head. It's not like I could lift him. Even on his side, he was as high as my chest standing, and he weighed over 2,000 pounds. I stood and put my foot on his neck behind his ear and started shaking him with my foot. Come on, Chili, up! Let's go! He grunted and rolled on his back for a belly rub. I knelt down beside him, scratched his belly, then got an idea. Chili, I whispered. We're going hunting! A mighty roar from Chili, and he was up on his feet in a flash, and knocked me on my ass and into the next stall. Oh, you heard that, did you? I asked while sitting there pulling straw out of my armor. Chili started galumphing past me and turned his huge head to me. Yowl, hiff, hiff, he grunted as to ask. Are you coming? I stood and shook the rest of the hay out of my armor and said, I'm coming. Hold your britches. And mind Irma, I warned, who was standing on a chair in the doorway to the stable trying to wiggle out the arrow I shot there. Chili squeezed past Irma and sat upright behind her outside the stables. His front paws crossed across his belly, looking up to see what she was doing. Hiff, hiff, he asked. I'm trying to get this bloody arrow out of my doorway. Irma replied as she pulled on it with both hands, and it came loose and she started falling. I ran for the front door to catch her, but Chili beat me to it and stuck out one huge paw, grabbed her and pulled her into his soft belly. Oh, thank you, Chili, she gratefully replied. Are you okay? I huffed as I finally made it to the front of the stables. Yes, fine. Thanks to Chili, she replied. Chili crossed his paws gently in front of her and started licking her hair and the top of her head. Irma squirmed out of Chili's grip onto her feet and started tapping at him with the flights of the arrow. Yes, okay. I'm fine, she said. He was only worried about you, I spouted. He smells of fish. Did you not brush his teeth after his snack? Now she was waving the arrow at me. I looked at Chili and mouthed the words, brush your teeth? Chili looked at me as if to say, how the hell should I know? I was asleep. Anyway, that will be 22 gold, 30 silver for the care of Chili for the year, Irma informed with her free hand outstretched. Irma, my sweet, here's 25 gold for the fine care you took of my bear. I placed 25 gold in her hand with a smile. Well, thank you, Sergeant, she returned with a smile. Shall I keep Chili's stall fresh and clean for him? She asked, showing the fabulous service she was known for. Oh, no, Irma, we're heading up to the Pillage lands to do some hunting. We'll be gone for a good season or more. But thank you. Again I smiled. Well, Chili's always welcome back. Oh, and you too, Sergeant, she smiled. Chili stood and started stomping his front paws on the ground to show his excitement to go. I mounted my battle bear mount and waved goodbye to Irma, and we were on our way. Almost at the end of Elwyn Forest, slowly galumphing along on my mount and with my face in a map of Azeroth, I found myself talking with Chili, as I always do. So I figure we can make Lakeshire in the Redridge Mountains by nightfall and maybe spend the night at the Lakeshire Inn. Chili stuck his face in my map and huffed. Yes, that means we'll see the Butcher family and get you your tuna tartare you like so much. Ha! Tuna tartare! I remember the first time I went to Lakeshire with Chili. Every guard and warrior in the town had their weapon half drawn and watched with huge eyes as the biggest bear they ever saw walked side by side with the King's Guard and paid no never mind to any one of them. as he passed. Brianna, the innkeeper and old friend, came out to greet us and took to Chili right off, and offered the best room in the inn to both of us. Then ordered her, then young chef, Sherman Famel, to come up with a dish in honor of her new huge friend. I didn't see it, but I was told he ran around for 20 minutes like a man possessed, finally dumping a working girl out of the tub she was bathing in and onto the floor and took the tub. Then proceeded to layer into the tub fish guts and tails, lobster claws and heads, squid, suckerfish, and numerous other seafood layer by layer. He then topped the thing with a huge purple leaf and a diced raw tuna. And for raw fish guts, I'd have to admit it looked pretty damn good. He then had it wheeled out to Chili by 2 kitchen stewards and presented it in front of myself, Brianna, and half the town as Chili's tuna tartare. A small sputtering of applause, and Chili wolfed it down in 3 seconds flat. Then walked over to Sherman and licked him from head to toe. The crowd roared with laughter and cheering, and a forever friendship, and tuna tartare was born. Chili was finally accepted, and I could not be happier. Although, I think my favorite part of the whole event was right after when that angry working girl came outside only in a towel, picked up her tub, and stomped off. Chili spent that night snoring by a warm fireplace with 4 pillows under his head and 2 hand-stitched comforters draped over him, while Brianna and I sat, had wine and cheese, and talked away the evening. So I figure we'll spend the night at Lakeshire, get up early, and do a hard ride through Burning Steps and the Badlands. I looked up from my map and looked at Chili. Both areas are full of sulfur and smell of rotten eggs anyway. Chili shook his head and grunted in agreement. Then on to Lochmoden. Put flowers on Dad's grave and stop and see Mom. Chili froze in his tracks, gave a yowl, hiff, and shook his head no. Oh, come on, I said. Mom loves you. Again, yowl, hiff, hiff, and a head shake. See, when my mother first met Chili, she whispered in his ear that if he ever tried to eat her, she was small enough that without a bite, she'd crawl down his throat, cut him open from the inside, and make a rug out of him. Then showed him the dagger she keeps in her bosom. Ever since then, whenever Chili misbehaves, all she does is pull out the small dagger and wave it at him. Oh, come on, that was years ago, I insisted. Did she not knit you that nice scarf last year for your name day? Chili slowly started to walk again. Honestly, I said while trying to keep a straight face and returning to my map. You, afraid of a 4-foot kindly old woman with a 3-inch pig sticker. Chili hung his head low and grumbled to himself, then raised his head and leaped in front of my mount. Quickly, I stuffed my map in my armor, grabbed my bow, and notched an arrow. With a great war cry, 2 orcs came flying out of the bush to our right. Chili leaped up onto his back paws and grabbed the big one out of the air, as I saw the smaller one trying to cast magic as he flew over, and I put an arrow through his teeth. His body hit the ground with a thud as I notched another arrow and swung around to help Chili, who had already devoured the big orc. All that remained of the big orc was a half skull, a battle axe with half an arm attached, and 1 leg with a new boot on it. I dismounted and poked the boot with my bow. Huh? We probably could have got some gold for those boots, had you not eaten one. I looked at Chili, and he totally ignored my scolding. Content with himself over the kill, he was licking the blood from his paws, and sitting pretty as you please on his fat ass. I walked over to the other dead orc, wondering to myself why 2 orcs would try to go through Elwyn Forest. It is so heavily guarded. I noticed a message pouch across the dead orc's chest and pulled it off his body, opened it, and looked at the sealed message. It was no use to break the seal. As I could not read orc anyway, I just put it back in the pouch and slung it over my head and onto my side. You know what this means, Chili, I said. We're going to have to make a stop at 3 Corners to visit Captain Parker. I put my boot on the dead orc's forehead and yanked my arrow out of his skull, wiped it on his cloak, and put it back in my quiver. This means we might not make it for tuna tatar tonight! Chili stopped licking his paws, looked at me. Hiff! Oh, that you heard, huh? I asked while I mounted my battle bear. Come on, let's get going, I said as we quickened our pace down the road. Chapter 8. Seekerheads. Reaching Redridge Mountains, I spotted the guard tower at 3 Corners and made a beeline for it. With my battle bear galumphing as fast as he could, and Chili easily keeping pace, my thoughts drifted from why two orcs would cut through Elwyn Forest to memories of my old friend Captain Parker. Well, Private Parker, when I first met him. I've known Daniel Parker most of his life, or at least since he was old enough to serve in the King's Guard. Young and ambitious, a natural born leader, whose men loved him and would follow him through hell and back. If I knew nothing else about him, that would be enough. But he also had a kind heart, was quick with a joke, and was a good man to have at your back in a bar fight. A smile crept across my face as I rode. I was excited to see my old friend again. As we pulled up to the tower, Parker was already coming down the stairs, yelling, "My gods, you've gotten fat, slow, and old." I spotted that white ball of fur 5 miles back and knew it had to be you. What took you so long? He chuckled, walked right past me, threw his hands behind Chili's ears, and rubbed hard. Draping an arm around Chili's neck, he said to the bear while pointing at me, "I see you're still hanging out with riffraff." "Hiff, hiff," said Chili. Parker took his arm off Chili and offered me his hand. "Well met, Sergeant. Good to see you again, old friend." "Good to see you, Captain," I said with a grin. "And good to see you haven't killed my men, yet." Daniel was a born leader. He knew that no matter who rode beside him, a 2,000-pound, 7-foot polar bear would panic young recruits. That's why he ran down first, to face the beast himself and ease his men. "A good man, that Captain Parker." "Ah, but they're not your men anymore. The king retired you," he said, throwing an arm over my shoulder. "Which reminds me, I've a gift for you before you leave." He squeezed my shoulder. "So what brings you to my neck of the woods?" "Hunting. And this." I held up an orc's message pouch and handed it over. "Ah, that explains Chili's lipstick," he said, smiling at the bear. "Did he get one, or did he make you do all the work?" "Hiff, hiff," said Chili. "I put an arrow through one's teeth," I added, and had another notch to help Chili. Parker raised the pouch and cut me off. Who had already devoured the Blackridge Guard, I'm sure. I opened my mouth to defend my honor, then my thoughts shifted. "How did you know there were two of them?" "Come inside," he said, tipping his head toward the stairs. "Oh, Captain," I said, and we stopped. "Yes?" "May I have the aid of one of your men for a while?" "Take your pick," he said without even asking why. "Thank you, Captain." I looked around and spotted a young recruit trying not to shake in his boots next to Chili. "You, Private, grab soap and a bucket and clean the blood off my bear. And brush his teeth." Parker, laughing under his breath, drew close as we walked. "Let's hope the boy doesn't piss himself. Those greaves are iron. They'll rust." We went inside the keep. Parker nodded with the pouch toward his office. I led the way. "To answer your question, Sergeant, they travel in twos. We've posted new patrols by the Deadwood Bridge. We think they're pulling supplies from a troll encampment in northern Stranglethorn." He broke the seal, drew out the scroll, and tossed the pouch on his desk. After a quick read, he said, "Fine work, Sergeant. Says they're starving and a sickness has broken out in camp. They're asking for help." "Ah, that explains the daring run through Elwyn." "Exactly," he said, tossing the scroll onto the desk. "I'd put you up for a medal if you weren't a civilian." He smiled and opened his left drawer, producing a small leather case the size of a cigar box. "Took these off a troll shaman last fall. Thought of you immediately. Happy retirement." He handed me the box. "Thank you, Daniel." Inside the old, beautifully bound case were 6 glowing arrowheads set in mammoth hair, 3 green, 3 red. Wow. Beautiful, aren't they? From what I got out of the shaman as he choked on his own blood, they're seeker heads. Green for messages, red for death. Tie on a hair or scrap of clothing from the one you seek, and the arrow will find them anywhere, he said, stepping beside me to look over my shoulder. "Anywhere on Azeroth?" He didn't have time to clarify. He said anywhere. Parker shrugged. "They're yours now. Enjoy. And again, happy retirement, Sergeant." "Huh. I'll probably keep calling you Sergeant. Dawn. Doesn't seem to fit." "I wouldn't have it any other way, Parker. Thank you. It's almost chow. You and Chili staying? Bunk the night?" "Afraid not, old friend. We want to make Lakeshire by nightfall." "Ah, Chili's tuna tartare?" "Yup," I laughed. "Does Brianna know you're coming?" "I'm afraid not." Outside, a clean, fresh Chili awaited us. Beside him, the young private nervously tried to pet him. Parker elbowed me and nodded. "No rust." The private snapped to attention. Sergeant, your bear is spike and span and his teeth thoroughly brushed, Sergeant? I inspected the work. Very nice, Private. Well done. Did you say thank you, Chili? I asked. Chili leaned in and gave the private a long hiff, blowing his hair back and baptizing him in bear spit. See, he loves you, I said, while Parker hid a laugh behind a meaty hand. A slow day, Parker said, clearing his throat. I'll send a fast rider to tell Brianna and Famil you're coming. Much appreciated, Captain. Perhaps the young private? The boy looked eager. Parker flicked his head. Go, tell Brianna to give you an ale on me. I called as he shot by. I mounted, Chili stomped, and Parker came to say goodbye. Bring back some bear meat and we'll crack a keg or two. I will. And thanks for the gift, my friend. Take care. Almost to Lakeshore, we passed a slower, wobblier, braver private who saluted. Sergeant! Then to Chili, Stinky Bear. He stuck out his tongue, safely after we'd passed. You make friends everywhere, I told Chili. He grumbled, thinking only of tuna tartare. We reached Lakeshire and tried to reach the inn, stopping every block to greet old friends and well-wishers. Chili had fans too, mostly children, petting and climbing on him. He adored it, but he was impatient for tuna. Sherman Famil did not disappoint. Out front stood Brianna and Sherman, with a tub between them, a white tablecloth draped over it, and a small crowd gathered. Once again, I was overlooked as both of them went straight to Chili. This is becoming an annoying habit, I muttered, dismounting. After petting the bear, Brianna came to me and kissed my cheek. Good to see you, Sergeant, she said with a wide smile. Then her face changed. What did you and Chili do to that poor boy? He said you tried to feed him to your bear. He ordered a keg on your tab and told anyone who would listen how he was forced to clean blood off a ferocious man-eating beast. As we walked inside, Famil unveiled Chili's tribute. The crowd gasped. It was gone in seconds. The private gave word you were coming, Brianna continued. Victoria ran upstairs to hide her tub from Sherman, but he already had it and was layering fish guts in it in the kitchen. She came down cursing that he owes her a new tub that doesn't smell like fish. Thank you, I said, laughing. Brianna poured ales and led me to the love seat by the lobby fireplace. Chili wandered into the dining hall, shoved the massive oak table aside with his butt, flopped in front of the fire, and immediately began snoring, full of orc and tuna. A whole keg, you say? Yes, she said. You owe me 2 silver. I put 2 gold in her hand. Here, and I'll take a steak and a room for the night if you've got it. Chili looks fine where he is. I can't let a private show me up. Bring me a keg, too. A pretty working girl approached. Company tonight, Sergeant? Right now I only have eyes for your mistress, love, but come back after she breaks my heart. I pressed 2 silver into her hand. And please, pillows and blankets for my bear? She ran fingers through my hair, told Brianna, he's cute, curtsied, and went to help. So, Brianna, how are things? Tough, she sighed. Local orcs are raiding farms. Captain Parker and his men do their best, but it's getting worse. Bad for business. I brought Daniel news that might end those raids quick. I raised my wrist. Like it? Retirement present from His Majesty. Her smile widened. You're retired? She snuggled closer. Good, you and Chili can live here. You in my bed, Chili wherever he wants. You can tend bar. We'll picnic and fish on weekends. Sherman will have a fit, but we'll be happy. I set her upright and brushed hair from her eyes. Hold that thought. Chili and I are going hunting a season or 2 to get my head straight. It's a change, not running a battalion and looking after the king. I need time to be my own man. Of course, she said, patting my knee. But let a girl have her fantasies. Beautiful fantasies, I said, and ones I might just take you up on. The 2 girls returned with blankets and pillows. One planted her feet, lifted Chili's head a few inches. The other stuffed pillows beneath. As they spread quilts, Chili rolled to his side and grunted. Both girls froze. He wants his belly scratched, I called. They dropped to their knees and scrubbed like a kitchen floor. Chili kicked his back leg in bliss. Mind those claws, I warned. The nearer girl hurried to the other side and scratched under his chin. Chili blubbered his big black lips. I pointed between them for Brianna's benefit. I'm not paying for that. She just laughed and waved them on. Brianna and I spent the night the way we always did, laughing, talking, getting drunk. Sherman emerged for an ale or 2, checked on Chili, and traded gossip. The working girls found friends. Eventually, I kissed Brianna goodnight and stumbled upstairs to the room set aside for me. Flopping on the bed, I landed on something hard in my lower back, the gift Parker had given me. I'd forgotten to leave my rider's pouch with my mount. I opened the case again, and my thoughts drifted to Nimicie, as they had when I first saw the heads. Wouldn't it be something if they crossed realms? Kathmandor came from here and took his family from here. No chance of finding a Nimicie on this realm, so if the arrowhead could find her, it might be the right one, in the right realm. I thought back through everything she'd touched. Nothing truly hers, unless a piece of her necklace remained in the ashes of my fireplace. Foolish, maybe, but I couldn't shake the thought. Or the arrows. I checked my new watch, 2:30 a.m., and that's when I noticed the bracelet on my wrist, the one Valdor had given me years ago to ward off hornet wasps out on the grasslands. Dying to try the gift, I scrawled a quick, drunken poem about Valdor's missing ass, tied it to a fresh arrow, and lashed on one of the green seeker heads with the bracelet. If it didn't work, I'd fetch the arrow in the morning and add the set to the junk in my bank. I stepped to the window, took aim over the trees, did my best to guess the fall, and loosed. The arrow vanished above the canopy in a green plume. Well, that was interesting, I muttered, stowed my gear, and collapsed into bed with thoughts of Nimicie carrying me to sleep. In the morning, the arrow had returned, buried in the headboard above my skull. I worked it free and read the attached note. Open quote, I don't know where you got this, but this magic is not to be played with. It is one of the seeker heads made by Nergal and given to his Shadow Moon shamans. If you have the whole set, I should very much like to see it when you return. Valdor P.S. The poem was not funny. You are an ass. Close quote. The bracelet was tied to the shaft. I slipped it back on, removed the head, and returned it to the case. The thin ribbon Valdor had used to tie it on was burned at both ends. For a moment I puzzled. Then it hit me. That bastard. The ribbon was from my stack of memoirs I'd been writing for years and keeping in Valdor's office. His way of telling me he'd burned them. Resolved to keep a good humor for the road, I washed with perfumed water, dressed, grabbed my things, and headed downstairs. Chili lay in front of the cold fireplace, the two girls wrapped in quilts, cuddled between his paws. Up, you lazy lump! We're burning daylight, I said, stepping behind the bar to pour an ale. I downed it, poured another to carry, and headed to the kitchen. A fair-sized mutton leg sat on the butcher's block. I could hear Sherman snoring in the next room, so I plunked 3 silver on the counter and took the meat. Back in the lobby, the girls and bedding were gone, but Chili hadn't moved. I tossed the meat on the floor. Up, slut, let's go. I set my boot on his neck to jostle him as his lips snuck out, sniffing for the meat. Oh, no, you don't. I kicked it 3 feet away. You want it? Get up. Brianna slipped out, kissed my cheek, and tightened her robe. Good morning. Why is there bloody meat on my clean floor? I'm trying to get this lazy beast up. Came down to find him curled up with the girls. She went to Chili, scratched behind his ear. Ah, Chili, you're a stud. Now get up and clean your mess. In a flash, he rose, took a step, gulped the meat, bone and all, licked the blood, and nuzzled her. Oh, sure, I said. You'll get up for her. We've a long ride today, I said. I want to get through burning steps in the Badlands before nightfall. Don't want to camp smelling rotten eggs all night. Just a minute, Brianna said, hand on my arm. I want to put salve on his nose so the sulfur won't crack it. She hustled off. When she returned, Chili followed, looking pleased and ridiculous. There stood a 2,000-pound killing machine, 9-inch claws, sporting a bright pink nose and lips. What happened to his lips? Side effect. It'll fade soon, she said, dabbing the last bit. Think about my offer, Sergeant. She leaned in and kissed me on the mouth. Wiping her lipstick from my face, she said, There, you match. Chili grumbled past, tail wagging. Chili never wags his tail. I lifted it and discovered a bright pink. Well, all exposed skin, Brianna said, trying not to laugh. Thank you, Brianna. Say goodbye to Sherman for us. I mounted the bear. Come on, Miss Chili, I said as we rode out. The day was long and brutal. The air was hot, thick with sulfur, and hard to breathe. The lava's bright red played tricks on distance and hammered the skull. Badlands dust swallowed trails whole. Good thing we'd crossed this way many times. Hard to tell time beneath the black soot shrouding the sun. but it was well into evening by the time we were nearly through. The air began to thin near the end of Stone Rot Pass. Finally, we reached the Valley of the Kings, collapsed under a tree, and kept a cold camp for the night. Chapter 9, Mangleclaw. Morning came, and both Chili and I were eager to get moving. With our bellies rumbling, the thought of hunting up breakfast was tempting, but no. We'd buy breakfast in town. We were deep in dwarven territory now, and though I was born and raised here, a half-dwarf on my mother's side, Chili was not. And there isn't a dwarf alive who doesn't know a tale about some relative who met his end at the claws of Mangleclaw, the legendary great white bear with 7-inch teeth and 9-inch talons who could swallow a man whole. Sound familiar? Chili is a dead ringer. He wouldn't have many friends, if any, here. The last thing I wanted was an angry mob after my bear. Or Chili dripping blood in the streets. I pulled from my rider's pouch a small red amulet, gift of Magni Bronzebeard himself bearing his seal, to assure Chili's safety in dwarf lands. I walked over to Chili. You know where we are, right? Yowl, he replied. Scratching his head, I looked him in the eye. And you know what I have to do, right? Hiff, came the resigned answer. It's only till we get to Mom's ranch, buddy. I pressed the amulet to his chest. Yeah, it glowed and became a collar with muzzle and leash attached, a large Bronzebeard sigil displayed on his breast for all to see. Yowl, yowl, hiff, he protested, muffled. I know, buddy, I know. I mounted my battle bear, leash in hand, and we started through the Valley of the Kings. I'll grab a few salmon and some flowers in town. We'll visit the graveyard, and you can have a snack to settle your gut until we reach Mom's. Along the road, more than a few guards gave us a wide berth, or else pulled in close for a better look, weapons in hand. Two particularly unpleasant ones rode past us on bighorn sheep, then circled behind and began taunting. The only good bear be a dead one, yelled one. Aye, that's a handsome collar ye got there. Where'd ye steal it? Growled the other. In my best dwarf accent, gods know I grew up with it, I called back, It no be stolen. A gift from His Greatness himself, Magni Bronzebeard. Would ye lads like the tale as we ride? Come to, and I'll be tellin'. No self-respecting dwarf ever turns down a free story. Danger be damned. With Chili on my left, I eased to the left side of the road so the guards could come up on my right. I looked straight ahead, true dwarf fashion, and began. This here's Chili. I'm Sergeant Don Zart, formerly King's Guard, retired out of Stormwind. Here to visit me mum, Bethan Zart, née Bethan Hammersmith. I glanced for a reaction. A half-breed, eh? Will your tale be half-true as well? The farther one sneered. I? Then I'll not be telling, I said, letting it hang. Shut it, Beardsby. I want to know, said the nearer one. He nodded at me. Go on, lad. I know your mum. Stood shoulder to shoulder with your duh? May the angels preserve. High praise from a dwarf, and meant to get the story, no doubt. I obliged. I told them how, when Chili and I were much younger, we fought at Sis Peak, that famous day when humans and dwarves stood shoulder to shoulder against 2 battalions of orcs and trolls. I'd been up a tree with my bow, Chili out front, and a pillbox of dwarves with blunderbusses beneath me. A troll warlock's firebolt slipped past my arrow and blasted the bunker sky high, knocking me from my perch. When I came to, I could hear the lads inside cooking alive. I tried the door. Locked, blocked, or melted. I couldn't budge it. I shouted for Chili. He hit the bunker door and went through like it was butter. 5 brave, burned dwarves crawled out and kept fighting. One had a blunderbuss with the stock burnt clean off. He'd fire, drop it in the snow to cool, pick it up and fire again, just as fast as the lads next to him. The battle won. That night I sat by a small fire sewing up Chili's wounds while he slept. Magni Bronzebeard and 10 dwarves encircled us in silence. I thought I was dead for missing that flare. I set my needle down, dropped to my knees, and bowed. Your Majesty. The arrow for the flare missed, but the one for that mage's heart didn't. Shut up, boy, Bronzebeard ordered, tossing a small red amulet onto my kit. I heard what you and that bastard white bear did for my men today. He stepped in and met my eyes. I had my wizard make that for your bear. Press it to his chest in dwarf lands. You may not be welcome, but no dwarf will harm your bear while he wears my symbol. His hand landed heavy on my shoulder. You deserve better, lad, but it's the best I can do for you and your brave pet. As quick and quiet as they'd come, they were gone. My best guess, a public honor for Chili would have felt like spitting on the graves of those taken by Mangleclaw. And that, lads, is how Chili got his collar. I smiled, then faced forward again, proper. The farther guard found a skin of ale under his saddle. Funny, that hadn't been there a minute ago. And we shared a pull. They gave Chili a long, hard look, turned their mounts, and rode on their original way. I don't care what the half-breed calls him, I heard one whisper. That's Mangleclaw. I held in a chuckle and quickened our pace. Taking the back way to the Stoutlager Inn, I swung around to the rear and whistled for Linda Hearthstone, the stable master and an old friend. She rounded the corner, knife already at my throat. I picked her up and kissed her to hush her, and the second she knew who I was, she slipped the blade away, wrapped her arms and legs around me, and kissed me back, hard. Hello, handsome, she said. Why are you sneaking around? Then she saw Chili. Ah, I see. Hello, Chili. Still alive, I see. Linda, darlin', would you be a love and fetch some flowers for Da's grave and a few salmon for Chili? He hasn't eaten since yesterday. I slipped a couple of gold into her hand. Aye, I'll do it for you. Me first, Beau. But not for that animal, she said, giving Chili a withering look as he pawed at his muzzle. She clapped sharply. Hey, you! Leave that on. There's not a man in this town who wouldn't want your head on his wall. I'll be back in a few minutes, Dawn. We can talk. She smiled and skipped off. Chili and I waited in the grass. When she returned, she had a picnic basket slung over one arm. Here, roses, a vase, and my blood sausage for you, Dawn. She turned to Chili. And for you. I had to flirt with that ugly old fishmonger 10 minutes to get these. 3 salmon, not one under 20 pounds, and I made sure his thumb stayed off the scale. So you'd better appreciate it. Hiff, hiff, Chili mumbled. Quiet, you big dumb beast. She dropped the basket into my arms. It nearly took me to my knees. Heavier than I expected, love, I said, kissing her cheek. Are you getting old, Dawn? She teased. Will you be staying, Null, a few days with your mum? I think so, I said, tying the basket to my bear. Good. Then I'll see you tonight and give you a proper welcome. She smacked my backside, started away, then snagged Chili's ear. And you, stay out of sight. She kissed his head and was gone. We headed up to the graveyard. It was quiet and deserted, the grass cut, graves neat and clean. I untied the basket and sat on the bench before my father's stone. Caps of Jonathan Zart, King's Guard, loving husband and father. I arranged the flowers in the vase and set them on the grave. Then twisted the Bronzebeard's sigil to the right and released Chili's amulet. I laid the 3 great salmon in front of him, and he settled to eat them slowly. His way of honoring my father, I think. I told Da what had happened these last 2 years. My retirement, the king's words about my watch, Stormwind's quiet peace. Mostly I spoke of Nimicie, how for the first time in 15 years, since Claire and the baby died, I felt anything like love inside me again. I told him how I'd had to let Nimicie go and asked him if he would have done the same. No answer, of course, but as always, I felt better for the telling, the way I have these 30-odd years when I can make the trip. Chili snored beside me the whole time. When I was ready to go, I pressed the amulet to his chest. It glowed, and the collar and muzzle returned. Chili snapped awake. Yowl, hiff, hiff! As if to say, that was a dirty trick. Sorry, buddy. Let's get moving. I patted his head, mounted, and we left the road for the swamplands of Loch Modan. Mom's ranch lay on the far side near Farstrider Lodge. Good hunting up there. Hillside grizzlies, foxes, bobcats, and longhorn sheep if you had a mind. The Zart Ranch is known for fine longhorn mounts. It's the business Mom built after Da was killed, a tribute to him and to his favorite hunting ground. Grassland hornet wasps pestered Chili as we rode. I was glad Valdor had returned my bracelet. I had time to think of Da and the days we'd spent hunting and fishing here. He'd hoped I'd be a blacksmith or a hunter, or even a bookmaker, anything but military. Pick a good trade and make some gold. Show a good woman a good life, son. Even a fine bricklayer makes more than a military man, he'd say. But I saw the way humans and dwarves alike looked at him, with respect. I was proud. I wanted to be like him. I was 15 when Da fell. A carriage came from the palace to take Mom and me to the funeral. I cried as King Varian himself undid my father's uniform, branded the king's seal into his shoulder, then buttoned him up and closed the coffin. When you take the vow of the King's Guard, you are King's Guard in life and in death. I hope, if there's a god or a heaven to stand beside my father in service when I pass and earn my seal. I stood in awe as every guard in the palace recited the death chant in unison, their voices ringing through the halls. Open quote, his watch on this earth has ended, but we shall see our brother again when we join him at the king's side in death, for honor and glory, for our king and for Azeroth. Close quote. I joined the King's Guard the very next day. A smile crept across my face as I remembered my mother arguing with the captain of the guard at the funeral over where Dao would be buried. A plot was dug for him in the Field of Heroes in Stormwind. We lived in Loch Modan, she said. We were married in Loch Modan, and we raised our child in Loch Modan. Not in your bloody palace. I'll be damned if my husband lies in ground he doesn't belong to. I'm taking him home. She was loud enough that King Varian himself came over, laid a hand on his captain's shoulder, and said softly, "You're not winning this one, old friend. Let the woman have her husband." He nodded to my mother. The captain bowed to his king. A few moments later, a well-dressed aide bowed to my mother. "His Majesty would like you to have this," he said, presenting a heavy pouch of gold. "And you may have the royal funeral wagon, driver, and team as long as you need them. They'll await you outside at the end of the service." He backed away, still bowing. The preacher said his piece. The guards paid their respects. 6 of them lifted my father's coffin to their shoulders, and with pipe and drum behind, they marched him to the carriage. A black ebony wagon trimmed in gold, ivory wheels, a team of 6 black horses gleaming in golden tack. They laid him inside. After I told her my plans and said goodbye, my mother climbed atop the coach beside the driver and, no doubt, gave him instructions all the way to Loch Modan. There, she bought a modest plot, a good headstone, and a stone bench for in front of his grave. She took the driver to our cottage, fed him, gave him a bed for the night, and sent him back to the palace on a longhorn sheep mount, saying she'd need the wagon and team a while longer. To this day, that carriage sits in her barn. Every year on their anniversary, Mum visits Da, then comes home and cleans the coach top to bottom. You might think this a grand fuss for a mere captain in the King's Guard, and you'd be right. But my parents were well known. Theirs was the first public marriage between human and dwarf. Like it or hate it, both sides respected it. It forged a bond between the races. Letting the little dwarf lady have her way in her husband's death was not just kindness, it was wise politics from King Varian. Chapter number 10. Hard Lessons. Reaching the ranch and closing the gate behind me, I yelled out, "Mum, your wee baby is to home!" And I took the amulet off of Chili, who ran around and rolled in the grass and killed a few foxes for fun and to get the taste of blood back in his mouth. Just as Mom came outside, "Wee baby me, Aries? 6 foot, 200-pound wee baby. Would split me in two." I met her on the porch, and she grabbed me, kissed me, and said, "You're getting old and fat." But you're the spitting image of your father, the handsome man he was," and smiled. Then pushed me aside and yelled at Chili, "Mind me, sheep bear. I'll be having you as a rug." But Chili was too happy to have the collar and muzzle off to pay her any mind, and continued to roll and hunt through the grass. Barely having time to lean my bow and rod on the porch, Mom grabbed my arm with both hands and started pulling me inside. And for a woman in her 90s, she was amazingly strong and beautiful, but by dwarf standards, she was still a young lass, for dwarfs have been known to commonly live well past 500 years of age. Without a word, she pulled me over to the dining table, sat me down, and went and got food and ale. Coming out of the kitchen with a cast iron pot of stew in one hand, a loaf of bread under her arm, and the other arm wrapped around a keg of homemade dwarven ale, she plunked down the stew to my left, the bread right in front of me, and the keg to my right, then pulled out a bowl, wooden spoon, and a tap from her apron. "So, tell me all you've been up to," she said as she tapped the keg in a traditional dwarf way, not with a mallet, but with the palm of her hand. And yes, if you're wondering, the same palm of the hand that used to redden my Aries when I'd get out of line. I started telling her the same story I had just told Dad a few hours earlier while filling my bowl with stew and looking around the ranch house to see if anything had changed. Which it hadn't. The house was still decorated with taxidermy, weapons, and photos of Mum and Da. and bear skins everywhere, and the huge wedding painting of Mum and Da, commissioned by the mayor, right above the master fireplace in the dining room. But unlike with my dad, when I came to the part in my story about Nimicie, I told my mum every detail about who she was and how I felt about her, and how I acted like a right shit. Mostly how it broke my heart to let her go. She sat there beside me and listened quietly, sipping her ale, and as I finished my story and was hoping for some wise words and a bit of sympathy, when a tiny right hand with the power of an orc's hammer came crashing across my cheek. Right. You listen, and you listen well, she said as she stood and started circling around behind me like a tiny drill instructor. That girl has a heart and a mind of her own. She gave her heart to you, you dumb shit. And she made up her own mind to accept the consequences of being with you. Do you have any idea how disrespectful you were to her? You're treating her like a dumb animal, and you knew best. What was best for her? She gave up everything to be with you, her family, her friends. Does that story sound a wee bit familiar? She stomped her foot and pointed at her and Da's wedding portrait, then again smacked me in the back of the head and continued. Do you even know if you sent her back to her home world, or if you condemned her to some between world hells? Yeah, dumb shit. She took my face gently in her hands and said, Now, Donald Jonathan Zart, you find a way to find that girl, and when you do, you fall to her feet and beg her forgiveness. 'Cause I promise you, your heart will never forgive you if you don't. And true love only comes once in life. She said as she kissed my forehead and held my head to her bosom while she looked at Da's portrait and said a prayer in the old dwarven tongue. And I don't mean that tall, skinny, pointy-eared, snooty thing you married. That wasn't love. That was you getting your willy wet for the first time is what that was, she snarled as she sat and took a drink of her ale. Now, Mom, let's not talk ill of the dead. And I thought I did love Claire, I said, rubbing my cheek to get the feeling back. Just then, knock, knock, said Linda, as she poked her head through the open door. Just so you know, Chili's out here throwing a bloody sheep's head in the air and catching it, she said, standing in the doorway and pointing outside. Mom pulled the tiny blade from her bosom and pointed it at me. I'm going to kill that bloody bear of yours, she said while shaking the knife at me. Now, Mum, you know Chili wouldn't have touched one of your prize sheep. It was probably a wild one that got in, I said in hopes of calming her down. Of course it was a wild one, she said as she stood and put her hands on her hips. There's a hole in the fence for a reason, you know. What do you expect, an old woman to go hunting? I put me does in heat in a cage by the hole and lure in horny bucks, then feed them with honey and oats, she said, putting away the knife. The best way to a man's heart is through his gut, not his dick, saying as she looked at Linda. I just came to get my basket back, and of course to catch up with Dawn, Linda said, as she took a step inside and smiled at me. Mom leaned in close to fill up her mug under the tap and under her breath said, Oh, we all know what you came for. Slut. Mum, I said quietly. Oh, Linda, darlin', while you're here, Mom said while putting down her glass and walking over to Linda. I will be needing some help with a sheep who looks sickly. Would you mind coming out to the stables and giving me your expert opinion? Mom said as she grabbed Linda by the arm and headed for the door, then turned to me and said, And you, get up off your Aries and do some hunting. If I'm to be feeding you and that bloody bear, I expect some meat on this table by morning. Oh, and there's a surprise in the barn for that bloody bear of yours, should you care to look. Taking Linda by the arm, Mom headed off to the stables. Thanks, Mom, I whispered to myself while smiling. Mom knew my heart belonged to Nimicie, and in her mind, that meant the rest of my body did too. And truth be told, in my mind as well. I gulped down the rest of my stew and drank my ale. Homebrew is always the best, isn't it? Then did as Mom instructed and went to the porch to grab my bow and ran over to Chili, who was still tossing the sheep's head in the air. I caught it and waved it at him. You almost got yourself killed for this little stunt, I scolded and threw it over the fence. A disappointed yowl from Chili, then, come on, Mom has a surprise for you in the barn. Getting to the barn, the first thing I noticed was the old wagon, shiny as a new penny. That's right, I thought to myself. Their anniversary was last week, the same day I was retired. I smiled as I thought to myself. I guess Mum has 2 reasons to shine up the old wagon now. Then I noticed it and was stopped dead in my tracks. Oh, Chili, look! The whole back left side of the barn had new wood and was painted, and had the old rotting wood floor torn up, and in its place, a 20 by 20 area of smooth stones and mortar. In the corner was a pot-belly stove and a wood basket big enough to hold a half cord of wood, full. On the walls were letters from thank yous and child drawings of Chili to royal and official accolades from all sorts of important people. Everything I ever sent my mom to do with Chili was framed and on the walls. And over in front of the stove, a huge box-type bed filled with straw and covered in sheepskins. Chili ran around the room, yowling and sniffing the pictures and rubbing up against the stove, almost breaking it, and then flopped his huge ass on the bed. I walked over by the stove and noticed something hanging on the wall beside Chili's bed. A huge red leather 3-inch thick collar with his name embroidered around it and a shiny brass clasp. This must have taken her months to make, I said out loud. I sat on the ground in front of Chili's bed, leaning my bow against it and looking at the collar in my hands. You know what this means, don't you, buddy? I said. It means she wants us to stay. How am I going to tell her I can't? I asked Chili. SNORE, was that sleeping bear's reply. I laughed and stood. It was just as well he was asleep. Watching me leave to go hunting without him would have broken his heart. I carefully put his collar back on the wall and grabbed my bow, and off I went. Spending the night in the woods hunting, I stayed close to home. I saw Linda ride off around 10 o'clock that night, looking very annoyed, and without her basket. She'll be back, I chuckled to myself, and the lights of the main ranch house went out around midnight. Then I was alone, and I had time to think as I stirred the small campfire I had going. I started to think about Nimicie and my mother's words. Could I have really condemned her to a life between realms? The guilt was starting to eat me alive, and I started wondering how I could find out. Then it hit me. If anyone would know, Valdor would. I quickly scribbled him a note, telling him my mother's words and asking him, please, was there any way I could find out? I tied the note to an arrow and grabbed the same seeker head from the pack I used before. Then tied it to the arrow with the bracelet Valdor gave me and shot it high in the air over the trees. Once again, it disappeared in a green plume. Then, putting everything away, I leaned against a tree to try and get some sleep, for the best time to hunt hill grizzly was just before dawn. A few hours later, I was awakened by my arrow hitting the tree right in front of my face, almost touching my nose. I didn't like how close these seeker heads got, but damn, they worked well. I wiggled the arrow out of the tree and untied the message, then put the arrow on the ground beside me and held the note up to the moonlight to read it. Rub me then, throw me on the ground. The note read. I did as instructed and waited. Nothing. I was just bending over to pick it up when a blue light shot from the paper and there was a 2-foot hologram of Valdor. You want to watch where you're shooting those things? I was in the bath, the hologram said. Okay, Valdor, I'm sorry, I said, finding myself talking to a hologram. Damn thing scratched me right under my arm and stuck into the tub. I'll show you, hologram Valdor said and started to strip. For once, Valdor, keep your clothes on and tell me about Nimicie. Okay, fine, but watch it, and how about sending a message in the daytime? Valdor? I yelled, again realizing it's just a recording. Okay, well, your mother was right to wonder because I wondered the same thing. It was a good thing I found some of her hair in your lap the night you slept on my couch, he said. I created a watcher's brew and have been keeping an eye on her ever since. She is home. She is sad and visits Private Donzart's grave daily, but she is safe and alive. For now. For now? I shouted. Easy, easy if anyone can see you. You'll look mad talking to yourself, said the hologram. What I mean is I have not seen hide nor hair of the 2 assassins that were supposedly out to kill her. I will let you know if I do. And with that, the hologram disappeared and the notepaper burnt to ashes. I decided to keep the bracelet tied to the arrow, and again Valdor used a piece of the burnt ribbon, so I untied the head and put it back in its spot and tied the ribbon to the arrow. This will be my message arrow, I thought to myself. But Valdor didn't tell me if there was a way I could get to Nimicie. Anyway, the dawn would be breaking soon, and if I wanted to get a nice fat bear for the table, I had best get a move on. About 15 minutes later, on the back of my battle bear mount, I spied a huge male hill grizzly. Dismounting and moving quietly, I approached the beast to within a good shooting range, about 25 yards. I took stance, notched an arrow, held my breath, and fired. A straight shot through the heart. The grizzly dropped where he stood. A clean kill. Good, I thought to myself and smiled. Still, I would sit and wait a good half hour before approaching, just in case the bear was playing possum. I took the time to make a field stretcher while keeping a close watch on my kill for movement or other predators. Clean it and skin it, drag it home on the stretcher with my battle bear, hang it in the smokehouse, and cut a back leg off for Chili, then head to the barn. Reaching the barn, Chili was still in the same position I left him in the night before snoring away. I dropped the meat in front of him. Up, you lazy lump! We're burning daylight! Again, Chili's lips darted out to seek out the meat, but now his bed was too high off the floor. Ha! You have to get up! You can't reach the meat otherwise! I said while chuckling. I knew we were at least spending another night. I'd like to spend one night in my own bed. So I stocked the wood stove for later that night. Then I went into the house to make breakfast for Mom, but she beat me to it and greeted me at the table with a huge plate of sausage and ham, blood pudding and bacon. Sit, eat, she said. I saw the bear you brought home this morning. Is it a habit of yours to hunt disabled three-legged bears? She asked while rubbing my head. Chili needs to eat too, Mom? I said as I went to pour an ale from the keg. Empty. I shook the keg. Empty. I then looked at Mom. Mom. What? We got talking about men and how they disappoint, and I'll tell you, son, that Linda is a lush. You drank the keg, Mum, I yelled as I walked into the kitchen to fetch another keg. Don't go blaming Linda. I saw her ride out of here last night around 10, fast and sober. Lights didn't go out till 12. You drank the keg, I said as I put a fresh one on the table and pulled out the tap from the other. Holding the tap to the keg and looking around for a mallet, Mom walked by and hit it with the palm of her hand. Pop! Right in. You have to teach me how to do that, Mom. I know. Your hands are too soft, just like your father's. She smiled and said, then sat down, grabbed herself an ale and slice of ham, and started eating. So, what do you plan on doing with that skin, Dawn? Are you just going to let it rot on the back of your mount? She asked as she ate her ham. I'll tan it right after breakfast, Mom, but then I want to get some sleep. I didn't sleep well last night, I said while stuffing my face with bacon and gulping down an ale or two before she shoos me away from the table. Oh, is that what they taught you in that fancy palace, to sleep in daylight hours? She said, teasing and smiling. Oh, Mom, I talked to Valdor last night, and he said you were wise to worry, but Nimicie is home in her own realm. And just how did you do that? She asked. I pulled out the arrowheads Captain Parker gave me and showed them to her. With these, they are called seeker heads. You tie the head onto the arrow with anything that belonged to or is a part of the person you wish the arrow to find. And it does, anywhere on Azeroth. Do they work? She asked. A little too well, I'm afraid. I've almost been hit in the head with them twice. And Valdor has a scratch under his arm, I answered. She then looked around the table and pulled a piece of ribbon off one of the table mats and tied it tight around her ponytail about 3 inches from the bottom, then cut off the bottom of her ponytail just above the ribbon and tossed it at me. There, in case you ever want to send your dear old mum a message. Oh, your pretty hair, Mom. A hanky? A ribbon would have been fine, but your pretty hair, I said to her with sad eyes. It'll grow back. Now shoo, you've eaten enough. I need to get the dishes done and start the day, she said. I'll help, I said, and grabbed a plate. She grabbed it out of my hand and said, You have your own work. Now go tan that beautiful bearskin before it rots. And she came around behind me with arms full of dishes and food and kissed me on my cheek and said, And a beautiful job of skinning you did as well, just like your father. Now off with ya, she yelled as she went in the kitchen. I poured a quick mug of ale and ran out the door with it. Well, I spent the morning washing and scraping and salting the skin, then stretched it on a skinning wheel to dry. Then went out to the field where Chili was playing and got him to follow me back to the barn. He ran for his bed and jumped on it. No, I need you awake, Chili. Sit up. And he did. I walked over to the wall and grabbed the collar. Mom had made him and showed it to him. See what Mom has made for you, Chili. It says Chili's art. I stretched it out across my chest and back and showed him the stitching. It means you are a part of this family and you will always be. And look how soft the inside is, made of sheepskin, I said as I took the collar and rubbed it on his paw. Now, buddy, I don't ask much of you, and I won't ask you to wear it anywhere else. But while you're here, would you wear it for Mom? Yowl hiff! And a nod from Chili. I reached up and put it on him, brought the clasp to the front, and then made a fuss over him. Oh, it looks so good on you, Chili, and a perfect fit. Here, come look for yourself, I said as I walked over to the shiny black carriage, so shiny you could see yourself clear as day in it. Chili sauntered over and plopped his fat ass on the ground behind me and sat up straight. After I stepped out of the way, a perfect reflection of a beautiful white bear with black nose and lips, crystal blue eyes, and a gorgeous bright red collar and shiny clasp. I tried to look busy puttering around the barn while Chili admired himself in his reflection for at least half an hour. I walked over to him. Looks good, brother, I said and smiled at him. Now come on. I'm sure lunch is ready at the house. Shall we go show off your new collar? I asked as I walked out of the barn. Chili was right behind me with his head in the air and prancing like one of the king's show ponies. I've created a monster, I thought to myself while letting out a chuckle. Reaching the house, I gave out a yell. Mom, come outside. Chili has something he wants to show you. She came out saying, your lunch is getting cold, what? Oh, Chili? Why you be a fine, grand, handsome bear with your new collar? And she quickly went over and reaching high as she could start to adjust and make a fuss over Chili's collar. Chili held his head high, and when she stopped, he plopped his ass on the front porch and sat there like a king. While all the fuss was going on, I ran inside and grabbed the keg, 2 mugs, and the platter of meat from breakfast in the kitchen and came out on the front porch. It's such a nice day. I thought we'd eat outside, I said as I handed my mom a mug, put down the keg, and put the platter of meat in front of Chili. No food for us, son? She asked disapprovingly. Aye, a true dwarven liquid lunch, Mum. I smiled and asked for her mug, and she slapped it into my hands, then turned to Chili. Here now, mind you, don't get grease all over me porch, I chuckled and said. Oh, there won't be any grease, Mom, and motioned for her to come to sit beside me on the porch. She headed towards me and whoosh! The meat was gone, and in its place was the cleanest platter in the house. She turned, looked at Chili, then at me. Does he always eat like that? She asked as she sat beside me. Fights like that too, I said with my mug to my face. Then, son, you are the safest man on the battlefield. And to think I used to worry about you, she said, sipping her ale. I kissed her cheek. No more battles, Mum, and kissed her again. And thank you for the beautiful barn and collar. Well, I said as I gulped down my ale, things to do and people to see. I've got to go return Linda her basket. And I looked over at my rod leaning against the porch and picked it up. And I think I'll drown a few worms on the way home. I'll see you at supper, I said as I turned for my battle bear. Chili, you stay here and guard Mom. Yowl hiff, hiff, agreed Chili as he tried to stretch out for a nap. Oh, no, you don't. Mom got up and waved a finger in his face. I've got a huge tree stump in me plown field, and you're just the bear to pull it out. Me horses can't do it, and I'll be bettin' you can. I mounted my battle bear and squared away my rod and made sure the basket was tight. You better do it, Chili, if you want supper, I said with a smile on my face, and I was off. I made my way to the inn to see Linda, and on the way stopped and filled her basket full of wild roses. Then when I got there, I made my apologies and explained my heart belonged to another, and though very angry, she understood. And when I opened the lid of her basket to show her the roses, a smile lit across her beautiful face again. And as it did, I made a hasty retreat, wished her well, and said goodbye. Stopping in the swamp to fish, I reflected on my career and my life with Chili and all the friends and good times we had along the way, and I would have to be crazy to give all that up to pursue one woman. Yet she's all I ever think about, all I ever want. So would you, I asked myself, and found myself saying, in half a heartbeat. Approaching home with the sun going down over my back and 7 nice sagefish tied to my mount, I found myself in song singing an old battle tune. Row, me bully boys, we've got to hurry, boys. We've got a long way to go, till we sing and we dance, and have women with no pants. Row, me bully boys, row. Mom was waiting on the porch as I pulled up with my battle bear and leaned my rod against it. Well, someone's in fine voice, she said, smiling. I pulled 5 sagefish off my saddle and handed them to her, while still smiling and humming. I see 2 more there, son, she said as I rode away. Chili, Mom, I yelled. Well, don't ruin his supper, and turn the bear in the smokehouse while you're there, she yelled back. I did as Mom requested before I went into the barn to see if Chili was there. I went over to the smokehouse and went inside. Without really being able to see much of anything, I grabbed the hook I hung the bear on and turned it around, and noticed how light this bear was. Swaying the carcass back and forth to fan the smoke, I noticed the bear was missing his other back leg. I left wondering what happened. Mom won't touch bear that hasn't smoked for a good week. Then I remembered what she said about the tree stump. I walked into the barn talking to myself. I guess he got it out? I looked at Chili lying on his bed and stopped dead in my tracks. He was coved in mud. With fish in hand, I walked over to him. Hey you, brown bear! That's my polar bear's bed. Her raised his mud-covered head and looked at me. I held up the fish and threw them on the floor in front of him. Crawling out of bed, he quickly sucked up the fish. Come on, I said. You're getting a bath. We went around to the back of the house and I hosed Chili down with the old fire wagon Mom bought years ago. That's when I noticed the stump. It looked like a mini tree with the roots sticking up in the air at least 4 feet high and 8 feet around. And I noticed it was soaking wet. Mom must have just hosed all the sand and dirt off it so it could be cut up for firewood. Hey, Mom! I yelled as I stomped into the kitchen from the back porch. How come you hosed down the tree and not Chili? I asked, a bit miffed. Your bloody bear looks like that by his own hand. Do you know? He pulled that tree stump out of the ground with one mighty yank, she said with her back to me, basting meat on the spit. I've been taking my team of horseback there for the past year. Never bugged the bloody thing. One yank. She said, and turned to me, put her hands on her hips and said, and then your bloody bear jumps in the mud hole it left and started tossing dirt clumps the size of me in the air, them hitting the ground and exploding dirt everywhere. It was like I was in one of your battlegrounds, she said and went back to her cooking. He came out of that hole, covered in mud, then ran off somewhere and left me to get the horses and drag the stump back here. You could have called him to hose him off, I said, still a bit miffed. I didn't want him around while I prepared his surprise dinner, she said, basting the meat on the spit. Wait, I said. Is that bear leg on the spit for him? I asked quietly. Well, of course it is, she replied. With some rosemary and garlic and basted in lemon and honey. Oh, he'll love it. Mom, you can't give him that, I said. Well, of course I can. He deserves it, pulling that stump out. I've been trying for over a year, and one yank. Mom, I interrupted. You can't give Chili cooked meat. Oh, I'll do it like you showed me, dear. I'll put it in front of him and step back away. Mom, Chili can't have cooked meat. Oh, of course, he can. You gave him a platter full at lunch. That was a small tray, not a whole leg, I said, frustrated. And a leg from the same raw meat he had this morning. Yes, so he'll get a tasted for it, she said with her back turned to me. She kept on basting the meat. I picked her up and put her in the chair in the corner of the kitchen, knelt down and looked her in the eye. Mom, Chili is a wild bear. I need him to be a wild bear. If you domesticate him, you'll be killing him, and possibly me, I said, calm and cool. She pushed me out of the way and went back to cooking, saying, Oh, don't be ridiculous. One good meal isn't going to ruin his whole life. I'm sorry, Mum, but you asked for this. How much is one of your live mounts? Not a magic one, a live one. 9 gold, dear, she said as she cooked. I plopped 9 gold on her kitchen table and grabbed her arm and escorted her outside where Chili was sitting on his ass, licking the water off the roots of the tree stump. I brought Mom over to him and said, Stay here. I then went and got one of her longhorn sheep and led it into the tall grass about 30 yards away, came back and held Mom in place facing Chili with one hand and raised the other to point at the sheep. Chili, hunt! Instantly, that sweet bear's face turned to a demonic monster. His crystal blue eyes grew dark and soulless and cold as ice, and his nose pointed and swelled. His black lips curled back, exposing his 7-inch sharp fangs and black gums pumping saliva down the sides of his mouth. His paws swelled and exposed his long black 9-inch razor sharp claws as he slithered past us without a sound into the tall grass. I quickly turned Mom around and held her in place facing the ram. With no sound but the wind blowing the tall grass and not a single sign of my huge white bear, a flash of white fur, and all was quiet again, and the ram was gone. I spun my mother around and got down on one knee and held both her arms and looked coldly into her absolutely horrified face. And though it broke my heart to do it, I said, "That be Chili. And I need him like that because if he hesitates or wavers on the battlefield or hunting big game, even for a second, it could mean our lives, Mum," I said, as cold and convicted as I could. Shaking and nodding her head, she spoke. "I'll go get him a raw leg from the smokehouse for supper." She squeaked out, trying to regain her fortitude. Mum," and I let go of her and stood up as she walked past me. I felt like a royal shit, treating her like that, but some lessons are hard, and I knew she got it as I watched her quicken her pace to the smokehouse so she wouldn't break down crying in front of her son. I stood there with a heavy heart. Then, bonk! A hard hit on top of my head and a ram's head hit the ground in front of me. "Oh, you got yourself a new ball," I said angrily, and picked it up and threw it towards the fence. "Yowl," from Chili, meaning what did you do that for? And he took off after the head. I went inside to have a few ales, sit in front of the fire, and hate myself for the rest of the night. About an hour later, my mom came and scrunched herself beside me into the armchair I was sitting in and said, "I gave Chili that raw bear leg for dinner." I smiled and said, "You probably should have kept it. He had ram for dinner too." "Speaking of," she said as she put the 9 gold back in my hand, "lessons, especially good ones, should never be free." And she kissed my cheek and hoisted herself out of the chair. "Would you like a plate of honey-roasted bear meat? It's a little undersmoked for my liking, but you might like it," she said with a smile. "I'd love one, Mom. Thank you," I said.